So recently, Netflix put out their new documentary, The Crash, which follows the tragic story of Mackenzie Shirilla, a young woman, a free spirit who's finding herself experimenting and also potentially murdering people. Because after Kenzie, her boyfriend Dom, and their friend Davion are found in the wreckage of a car that doesn't, to the eye, look like it could have had any survivors, it starts to look like this could all be a misguided, albeit tragic, accident. But what happens when sadness turns to suspicion and anguish turns to anger? Because what would transpire is that just two families would lose their children that day, with one person from the accident miraculously surviving. And although we're taught that people grieve in different ways, some would say that this victim's way of grieving was a bit too strange. This is the story of how families were fooled before growing suspicious of a young girl who completely denied her guilt in killing her own boyfriend and his friend. And we're even going to be giving you guys some of the key details that Netflix did not tell you about Mackenzie Shirilla.
So before we get into this case, I just want to say we are talking about a real life issue that actually happened and a real life crime with obvious victims, and our thoughts and prayers go out to them as well as their friends and families, and we want to say that before we get into the episode. So let me set the scene. We're starting off in July 2022 and we're in a place called Strongsville, Ohio, which is a very normal, very middle-class suburban town on the outskirts of Cleveland in the United States, about 20 miles away from that very big town. And in this town there are a group of friends that include Mackenzie, Davion and Dominic. And these guys are very normal teenagers. They are rebellious. They might be going out and having a bit of a good time. They might be drinking. But again, they're very, very normal activities for kids of their age. Now, some people at their school might have called them the stoners of the group. Are we allowed to say that, Joey?
I don't know what stoner is. So
but yeah, basically they were described as stoners in their high school. They would go out together. They weren't really known as like ravers. They weren't known as going out on the town, going crazy, going to nightclubs, that sort of thing. Again, in America, when you're under 21, you can't actually do any of those things anyway. But they basically would go around to their mate's house. They'd sort of do sleepovers. They'd have a few, substances. Scooby-Doos, exactly. And enjoy themselves. But they weren't known as, wild, things. They were known as very normal teenagers.
They weren't an accident waiting to happen, this group of friends, is how you're trying to describe it, in my opinion.
That.
And in my opinion, every school, whether you live in the United States of America, whether you live in the UK, every school, probably each year group, has a group of friends that are a little bit like this, like Josh is saying. They're not quite at that stage where, Dom himself, one of the people in this story that we're tragically going to speak about, he was not too shy of actually turning 21, being able to go out there in the real world, move out on your own, do stuff, be above the legal age of consent to drink alcohol and things like that. And at this point, these guys weren't at that stage. And therefore, a lot of their social activities would pretty much revolve around one person having what we used to call back in the day a free house, Josh. Remember that?
Yes, I do remember the free house time.
Free house. I don't know if you was as road as me. I used to call it a free yard. Sometimes.
Well, I know I was not
free
road
yard
enough
this weekend.
to say that.
Anyway, when I did have a free yard, there may or may not have been a small crew of my friends that descended upon my house and may or may not have experimented with substances. What I'm saying is, these guys weren't no offence here, they weren't a group of junkies, is what I'm trying to say.
They definitely weren't. So why don't we go one by one and let me explain a little bit more about who they were and how their friends described them. Because Mackenzie and Dominic were a couple. They were going out and they'd actually been dating for a very long time. So they were, I believe, 17 and 20 at the time.
Yeah, so Mackenzie was roughly 2 years younger than Dom. It's the same as like me and my missus. There's 3 years at times, but most of the time it's a 2-year period. Exactly. They were a couple of school years between each other.
And they met when Mackenzie was 14 and Dominic was 17. So they'd been together for a long time. But what is very clear to say at this point is that their relationship was very much off and on. They had one of those teenage romances where they fell out, they broke up, they got back together. So it wasn't like they were together for the entirety of that 4 years.
During that time that they were off and on, would you describe it as a heated relationship when they were off?
I think it was a very much heated relationship all the time, to be honest with you. And some might say aggressively heated.
Some might say one-sidedly heated.
Yes, and we'll get into that. We'll get onto that in a second, 100%. But let me tell you a little bit more about Dominic. Dominic was known for his maturity and his kindness, and one of his mates actually referred to him as Master Yoda because he was as smart as the character on Star Wars. He was close with his older brother Angelo, who described him as one of the most selfless people he knew. And Dom was very family orientated, attending every family get together he could, and he loved spending time with his nieces and nephews. And he was really ambitious as well. He had a clothing line, he had his own business, and he was recording his own music.
I know that we've only been able to have testimonies and see what we saw on the documentary of Dom himself, but he just seems like a very chill sort of guy, doesn't he, Dom?
You really liked this, Dom.
I did really like Dom.
You really liked him. Yeah, he knew what he was doing. Like, again, it seemed like he was a switched on kid. Like, he knew what he was doing. He was investing money, making money. Like, even at that age, you have to say he was mature beyond his years.
Yeah, and again, like, not what we would link with a typical sort of character that is involved in the activities that the show portrayed. And what I mean by that is what a lot of people will say is you could perceive those types to have a lower sort of ambition or ambitious ceiling, and that wasn't a accurate representation of Dom. Like you say, he was an ambitious young man.
No, he seems as though he was a really good guy and had his head switched on, really, which was very different from the way that people perceived and what I've very much heard about what Mackenzie was received like at school.
Well, if I can just point out a main difference between the two of them, because you've just jogged my memory there, Dom didn't strike me as the sort of person that wanted to be the centre of attention. I very much pick that up from like body language when someone else is videoing, normally Kenzie, and the camera goes on him and stuff like that. He didn't want to be the centre of attention, I don't think, Dom. But maybe you would say that Kenzie may well have been.
She did. And right, let's just say this. She grew up in a very normal middle-class household. She'd lived with her parents. She had a very normal upbringing. I haven't seen any
A lot of people would debate that those parents aren't very fucking normal.
There you go. Well, this is the thing. Like everything that I did in the research, again, when you look into these cases, sometimes you say that something's gone on. I couldn't find anything that had gone on in her childhood or anything around this case that might say it was unusual.
Well, this is so fascinating, isn't it? Because when we do these cases, and obviously you're about to find out details about this case and about this girl, when we do these cases, there's often what we refer to as trigger moments, trigger points, stuff like that in the childhood. Usually it will be a case of witnessing domestic abuse from a very young age, things like that, maybe losing a parent or being the victim of abuse from a very young age. None of those traits were there for Kenzie. And it almost leads me down a chain of thinking of saying maybe Kenzie's biggest downfall could have been through lacking life experience that shapes you to have perspective and shapes you to become a more decent person at times.
This is it, right? I feel like Mackenzie is one of these people that is like a high school person. And what I mean by that is we watch television shows about American high schools all the time. Like we've literally grown up watching these television shows. And I remember a key theme within that is the bullying culture, the bitchiness, like the fights, like all of this stuff that you experience growing up at school. Obviously, we had it in the UK, but I feel like even in a weird way, maybe we're sort of shown this through TV and movies in the US, but I feel like it's even worse than what it was in the UK. Like we can have a little bit of a laugh between each other to know that some things are not that serious, but I feel like some of the drama in America feels like it's way more significant and way more intense.
It's Mean Girls vibes without the comedic element And the fact that it's a bloody great movie, if I do say so.
Yeah, well, I'm
but
glad
it is Mean Girls vibes, isn't it?
I'm glad you mentioned that, because much like in Mean Girls, Mackenzie actually created a burn book. Now, as a Mean Girls connoisseur, Joey, can you please tell me what a burn book actually is?
A burn book is the sort of place you would go to call Janice in a dyke, you know, or to say that Train Pack made out with a hot dog.
Yes.
Or, no, I'm joking, no. But burn book is, that's a Mean Girls reference for anyone who doesn't get that right away. A burn book is basically something that, I don't know whether it was already a thing, but Mean Girls definitely made that become a thing. I remember this becoming a thing after that movie. Maybe it already was, and that's why they symbolised it. But regardless, it would almost be a photo album where you would write horrible stuff or things, rumours and things like that about how other students were perceived or known throughout the school. Are you telling me she had a burn book?
She had one of those, and it was so detailed that she had writings on 48 different classmates and people that she was slagging off in this burn book. So what I think is quite clear is that Mackenzie, unfortunately, was a bully in her school, and she would write horrible things. And I'm sure it wasn't just writing horrible things that ended up happening in her school. And I know that for certain because there were lots of other things that she did which were very concerning, including sending some African-American students in the school some very racist memes over airdrop, which I learned doing the research of this case, which was absolutely disgusting. She had a case of abuse against the teachers. Again, she was very violent, or at least in a verbal sense, against the teachers. And so she had a very bad disciplinary record. And that's just one example of that disciplinary record.
There was a part on the documentary where her dad is talking, and he's kind of quite smug about it, like he had done this heroic thing. And he goes, yeah, I know when my daughter's lying. He said, once the school called me up, I come down there, Kenzie's in tears. He said, I took one look at my daughter. I said, did you do it, honey? And she says, no, Dad. And he said, that's good enough for me. And he just smiles at the camera like, yeah, like I've done some sick parenting. It's like, your daughter killed 2 people, bro. Not an appropriate story. And also, clearly, we wouldn't be here if you weren't a fucking shit parent. So probably not the best story to tell at that time. Probably why Netflix decided to include it. But yeah, I think that the parenting comes into the school life behaviour, because clearly if that example that her dad showed and portrayed as being a past event that had happened on that Netflix documentary, if that's an example or a sample of their parenting, then they did nothing to help. They hindered their daughter's behaviour massively in those sort of years at school.
And this is it, right? We've both watched the documentary. Joey, I would say, is an expert of this case,
I knew about the case before the documentary
comes out. But what I would also say is we're going to give you information and facts that are around the case and not just within the Netflix documentary. So even if you have watched it, you will gain something from this episode, because what I wanted to do is not just take a Netflix account of what actually happened in this story, and we want to give you a more thorough and full picture of the events that actually occurred, because we've seen it many times, Joey. We've watched Netflix documentaries, we've watched Amazon Prime documentaries about these true crime cases, and they very often have a narrative that they're trying to convey, and within a 90-minute episode or a couple of episodes, there's only so much you can go through, but also they often try and sort of paint a picture of a story that might not be the truth. It might actually be the way that they want to spin a narrative, sell, watching the television show, and it might not be accuracy. Whereas on this channel, we're always trying to provide the accurate takes and what actually happened in the cases that we go through. So that's what we're going to do. Right, before we get into that, we are starting a bit of a journey at the moment, and it's all about regrowing some hair, isn't it, Joey?
It is. Voy is kind of my last chance saloon, to be honest with you, because I told you a while ago that I'm a little bit insecure about this part of my hair. Look, see these little bits? I feel like they're going a little bit patchy. I'm a bit worried I might go bald. I know you can't have it all, but I want to continue to be the full package for as long as I can.
Yes.
And therefore, you suggested to me that I have a little go at what you have been trying, which is the Voy hair loss treatment.
Yeah, that's it. And so basically what we've been having, because it's got minoxidil in this beautiful treatment, it allows you to keep some of the hair you got and potentially grow some of it back. And while 1 in 6 men in the UK actually do suffer with hair loss, we found, trying this treatment, that we've actually been able to start regrowing some hair back.
And I had to have a little look into minoxidil myself, because I'd never heard of it. I was shocked to find out. I didn't think anything was properly clinically proven to help with hair loss, but minoxidil definitely is, isn't it?
This is the thing, and while we've got loads of mates now that are going to Turkey, they're actually going through the transplant, they're spending thousands of pounds, they're travelling to another country to get a surgical procedure.
Some of my ones not coming away too happy, you know who you are.
Yeah, this is the thing, it's brutal to say, but I want to try and prevent that wherever I can, and this is why when Voy reached out to work with us, we were really happy, because it means that we can start this procedure, start this plan, and actually do it in a non-surgical way, not have to go through all the faff, and actually try and regrow some hair properly. Yeah, so if you want to start keeping your hair and potentially growing some of it back, then Voy is the place to go. Everything's online, it gets delivered to your door, and you can track all of the progress through the app, which makes the whole thing way easier and way less awkward. So if you or your partner are experiencing hair loss and you want to do something about it, then all you need to do is click the link in the description. That will take you to the Voy website. And if you use code Joey and Josh, you'll get 45% off your first treatment. And it's a really, really simple process. I know because I've done it myself, and actually starting to prevent hair loss is far better than taking that dreaded flight to Turkey. Thank you to all of you that have supported Voy so far. It means the world to us knowing that so many of you have found help using them already. And remember to use that code Joey and Josh for 45% off your first order. Now let's get back into the video. Now, outside of school, Mackenzie was known as being obsessed with social media fame, and she was consistently posting on TikTok and Instagram, and she was known to be wanting to become a model and a lifestyle influencer, regularly showing off her designer clothes and promoting body positivity, even though she was privately shaming other girls for their appearance.
Not just privately, by the way, I've seen stories that she uploaded to either Instagram or Snapchat when she literally uses the word. She's talking about people and something, I can't remember what she says, but she says, if that's the way you feel, why don't you go and yourself?
Yeah.
So she's hardly a fucking basket of roses, this girl, is she?
And this is the thing, right? Let's go back to the relationship between Dominic and Mackenzie. As we said earlier on, it wasn't rosy at all. So obviously she's got this penchant for designer clothes. She's got this desire to look good and be a certain way and keep up with the Joneses, right? Dominic was the one that was actually funding that behaviour. He was so smitten with her, wanted to impress her so much that he would often go out there, buy the designer clothes, buy her food, buy her groceries to keep her on side and keep her in the good books. And that is because Mackenzie had a reputation of flying off the handle when Dominic wasn't doing that. So he was very much, again, I don't want to say off the bat it was an abusive relationship, but I think you can very easily describe it as that.
I think that all you need to do is hear accounts from Dominic's friends and family, and you wouldn't need any of us to describe it as an abusive relationship. You could have it from as close to the horse's mouth as you're possibly tragically able to now get it.
And obviously the explosive nature of this relationship was also shown quite vividly on the Netflix documentary.
Yes, because there was a video retrieved from Dom's phone. I don't know whether it had been sent to someone or he had just recorded that and kept it on there, maybe at some point, you know, believing that he might have to use it someday, which really is a chilling thought to even think. And that was Kenzie. She's outside Dominic's house and she is banging down the door. He's got her on speaker on the phone and he's saying, Kenzie, you're not coming in. Like, you need time to cool off, whatever. She's like, I'm paraphrasing here, but whether you fucking open this door or not, I'm coming in and whatever. And yeah, I mean, that very much so draws the lines that, listen, we all want equality. If a man is talking to a woman like that, then fuck me. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. If he lives next door to me, I'm coming out my house and beating
also,
that man up.
If
probably.
The parents had seen that potentially or been in the house at the time and known that was going on, I'm sure they would have behaved very differently. I'm sure they would have actually taken action.
Being someone that social image and your just general image is everything to you, like Kenzie was, that wouldn't have come to fruition. It just wouldn't have happened if the parents were in the house.
Yeah, she would have behaved
those
in that way.
Parents to think she's a little angel,
yeah.
And she wouldn't have wanted them to see that side.
No, was this the one where she actually threatened to like key his car? Or,
yep.
Yeah, that was the video. Yeah, I remember that one now.
Yeah, it was an abusive relationship, in my opinion.
And then there was Davion. Basically, he was known as a friend of Dominic's, wasn't he? That's basically how they started their relationship together.
Yeah, Davion was a new friend. This is how Kenzie's parents described him. Yeah, he was the new friend. He was a new friend, you know, like he was insignificant because he hadn't been part of that group of friends for that long. But yeah, he was more of a friend of Dom's than Kenzie.
Yeah, but obviously he's within a big friendship group anyway, and there's a lot of other kids in this group that weren't necessarily covered in the documentary, but also aren't really talked about. You know, like, again, we focus on these three because of the tragic incident that happened, but there were lots of other characters around this as well, is what I think we need to say.
And when we speak about this group, by the way, Davion wasn't your typical type of character that would actually fall into this crowd, and that's why we actually described him as being a newer friend. He was somewhat of an athlete, wasn't he?
Yeah.
It was only kind of in the past sort of 10, 12 months, according to his parents, that he had started to fall into this crowd.
He's got the reputation, Davion, of being like the all-American sort of like sportsman. Like he was, you know, doing basketball, American football, swimming, athletics. It's like that sort of crowd where you're a sportsman, you're looking after yourself, you need to perform at the top level. And by the way, obviously in America, you can play college sport in front of 100,000 people.
Yeah.
So you're very close to being almost like a professional athlete sometimes when you're at high school. So obviously he looked after himself. And the biggest gutting moment for him, I'm sure, was when he did his ACL.
Yeah.
So obviously he was playing American football at the time, I believe, for the high school at a very good level, and he had a horrific injury. And we know how significant ACLs are, obviously being, you know, fans of football. That can take you out for like 9 months, a year. I mean, it can end the career.
18 months it can take you out for, trust
yeah,
me.
yeah. So it can literally ruin your sporting career. So I don't know whether that was directly, it definitely wasn't in the documentary said, but I don't know whether that was directly a factor in the reason why he fell into this crowd potentially.
You would imagine it would be.
Yeah.
You'd imagine it would be, because if you're not training amongst your old teammates and stuff like that, it's, you know, it's very much along the lines that we've seen with professional football players and stuff like that. When they've hit their dark periods is often when they do feel secluded, and most often that comes from being injured and not them being in the same routine as everyone else. Again, very important though to mention that Davion wasn't described as being depressed, anything like that. Right. It was just a change of scenery from what this young athletic kid was used to in terms of Davion. And the person who I always thought most prominently and effectively and most accurately spoke about Davion would have probably had to have been his little sister for me.
Yeah, and I think we have to say that Davion's sister came across incredibly well in the documentary, and she very much fought for her brother throughout the entire process, and she really brought the characters to life in a way that a lot of other people, I thought in the documentary at least, didn't.
Yeah, her strength, and I would actually say no nonsense attitude, is something that I think for a young woman is commendable, especially in such tragic circumstances. So I think that she really did she brought that documentary to life in a tragic way, but one that I think that everyone around her would be very, very proud of her for.
Yeah, 100%. And the last thing I want to say on Davion is that he had a really big future ahead of him. I mean, he was not only this amazingly talented sportsman, but he also had a real artistic element to his life. And that artistic element ended up being barbering. And so he very much was going down that path. He was already earning money and starting a business being a barber. He was actually already doing haircuts. But again, he was then going into the future saying, I want to set up my own shop and I want to start my own life being that. So again, that was very much sort of like something for him to look forward to, and he had a future very much ahead of him. So to everyone on the outside, these were just three normal teenagers living a very boring and normal life. And yes, some were viewed as being kinder than others, but the three of them were heading towards a graduation party for their friend called Kelly Vrya, and it was just another night of fun for them all. Dominic, Davion and Mackenzie rock up to the party, and they've got a bottle of tequila and some substances with them. They head over to the fire pit and they start playing games. And when they were there, Mackenzie asked Kelly if she was into taking some magic mushrooms. But the group didn't partake in any substances or alcohol while at the party, and instead they stayed for just about 25 to 30 minutes debating whether they should stay up or whether they should head to another friend's house. And that is exactly what they do, because between 11 and midnight they arrived at a sleepover at the home of their friend Paul Burlinghouse. And the group spent the first part of their night listening to some music and watching YouTube videos, including a shark documentary. And while they had substances with them, they decided that it was too late in the night to take them. And their mate Paul went to sleep shortly after midnight, leaving the rest of the group to hang out in the living room.
So it said that although Paul's house was the sleepover spot, there wasn't actually much sleeping being done between Kenzie and Dom. They were kind of chilling. It was said that Dom was a little bit in and out, but Kenzie was very much awake. It said that she was smoking and things like that, and the data as well as witness testimony show that around 5:30 a.m. Kenzie decides to leave the house. Now at the time, and this is something that the Netflix documentary left out, there was actually somewhat of an argument that happened, and a lot of people have debated over the legitimacy of this argument and whether or not this argument was as it's been told. But way before the Netflix documentary, when people first started reporting on the situation, it was said that Kenzie and Dom had a heated argument over Kenzie not wanting Davion to get in the car. He was actually supposed to stay at a friend called Bubba's house, but for what reason or another, he ends up saying to Bubba, listen, I'm going to catch a ride back now. I'm going to grab a couple of hours sleep. I'm going to come and meet you tomorrow. That we know happened. But what we don't know is whether or not Kenzie and Dom had an argument over Davion getting in the car. If they did have that argument, then it shows clear premeditation that Kenzie, in my opinion, knew what was about to happen. Now, here's why I say one thing that we do know for a fact did happen was some form of an argument. And that's because Netflix didn't include the fact that there was a back and forth over text message between Kenzie and Dom when Kenzie's already in the car telling Dom that she wants him to hurry up. Now, just minutes after they leave, we see this bit of CCTV footage where Mackenzie herself is seen making a right-hand turn from Pearl Road to Progress Drive. It's calm, it's composed, controlled, and shows no sign of an intoxicated or disorientated driver. However, just moments later, that driver clearly becomes more erratic when CCTV cameras catch the car, and at this time, it's driving at an unimaginable speed. Seems fairly controlled to the eye, but very fast, around 100 miles per hour down a residential road. And just moments later, that car smashes into the brick wall of a building, leaving it looking like this. Now, Josh, we saw the scenes during the documentary of the police response, and obviously, look, it was a hard watch at times. They literally figure out that two people are deceased there, and there's almost an argument over, hold on, is this girl deceased or is she not? She looks like she's breathing and whatever. And again, it's very sort of raw footage to watch. What the Netflix documentary maybe didn't tell you, because I don't remember them telling us this, is we were kind of painted the picture that the police rock up there straight away. Do you know that wasn't the case?
No, it wasn't the case at all. It was up to about 45 minutes, wasn't it, between them having the crash and someone actually even calling the police?
Yes, yeah. And then that's when the police eventually arrived. Yeah. Now, I think it was determined after that the situation wouldn't have been able to have been changed, regardless of the response time. But that situation was unfortunately both Dom and Davion left deceased and announced dead as soon as the police arrived at the scene from the impact of the crash. The meantime, the police are somewhat arguing, debating over whether or not the third person, the driver of the vehicle, was still alive, which they quite quickly come to the conclusion that she was. That driver is Mackenzie Shirilla. Kenzie was alive, but that doesn't mean that she went without injury. She had a broken femur, 3 broken ribs, a broken arm, a lacerated liver and kidney, and damaged arteries. Mackenzie Shrilla was actually airlifted to the hospital. And the horrific aftermath of a tragedy wasn't all that first responders found at the scene of the crash, Josh, was it?
No, it certainly wasn't.
What they did find were hallucinogenics and evidence of substances, substance use, evidence of substances in the car.
But what exactly were they then?
well, we can't say the names, but,
No.
well, we can one, I think. Mary Jane and magic mushrooms.
Yes.
Now, let me tell you something, right? As much as people might dispute the Mary Jane thing, I'm not getting into that. You cannot drive on magic mushrooms. Take it from someone that's done them. You cannot drive a car on magic mushrooms. But when Mackenzie Shrilla has her bloods tested at the hospital, there's no sign of alcohol and there's no sign of hallucinogenics in her system. There is THC detected, but a level in which you would be under the legal limit. That is once she's at the hospital. That is once she's actually, because I do think you have to give your consent to have your bloods tested if something's not considered to be a crime scene. Am I correct?
100%. And just to make this clear, like having blood transfusions and being operated on is not commensurate with being tested. So I don't think that testing happened immediately after the crash.
No, and then maybe some people should look into the half-life of drugs. This is something I know from the sporting world industry and people that have been caught cheating, performance enhancers, things like that. Substances have a half-life. Once they're out of that half-life, it's pretty hard. Blood tests will detect them better than other stuff will. But say, for example, right, that element of THC that was under the legal limit, yeah, well, it wouldn't have been under the legal limit when she was driving, would it?
No.
No, of course
it wouldn't.
It was hours and hours later.
Yeah.
If I took a bit of THC now, I'll be above the legal limit. If you test me in 5 hours, I'm going to be under the legal limit, aren't I? Do you know what I mean? So I'm just saying, and also adrenaline, blood transfusions, horrific injuries, all of these things would make a cocktail for that. Now let me tell you something that you may not know as well, right? Just historically, throughout my childhood and stuff like this, by the way, my information could be wrong here. It could definitely be wrong here. But do you know what I have always been taught?
Go on.
Regardless of whether you test for them or not, you can't find hallucinogenics in someone's system, really.
Really?
I've always been taught that. Whether or not it's true, I don't know.
Well, this thing, maybe testing has a lot of sort of advanced. I mean, this was 2022, so I mean, maybe it's got even better since then. But I remember watching, the cop shows back in the day. I remember they really did struggle with substances as opposed to alcohol. Like the testing for alcohol is intense.
Put it this way: when I started driving, get pulled over, breathalyzer, bomb straight away, right? They used to be disgusting back in the day because they used to have one handle, which meant you'd be blowing on a breathalyzer, which a load of other people have blown on. It's disgusting. Anyway, then when I started driving at 17, I'm 31 now. When I got to about, I'd say post-lockdown, so like 26 plus or whatever, they brought in roadside swabs. And that meant that you could test for Mary Jane, the devil's dandruff, all that sort of stuff. However, it was always heavily alluded or heavily rumoured, at least when I was growing up, that you cannot test for hallucinogenics. They just don't show up in your system for some reason. So I don't know. And again, I could have that information wrong. But as far as the police were concerned, Mackenzie Shrilla did not have any hallucinogenics in her system.
But that wasn't the only thing that happened that was weird in the hospital, was it?
It wasn't the only thing that happened that was weird in the hospital, and it wasn't the only thing that happened in the hospital that Netflix failed to shed light on. Because although Netflix showed the family's response to hearing the horrific news about Mackenzie, Dom, and Davion, they didn't show the secret conversation that Mackenzie and her mother had inside the hospital. A conversation where they were almost speaking in tongue of some sorts. They were adding isms onto the end of words and stuff like that. And I'm going to paraphrase once again, but it's heavily alleged that Mackenzie turns round to her mother and basically says, shall we say it was a seizure? Or can we say it was a seizure? Now, Mackenzie's account has always been that she has no memory whatsoever of what caused the crash. Now, if you had no memory, but your only memory and your only thing that you know inside is that you're innocent, I just don't see why you'd be formulating an excuse of why this crash happened. Surely you'd let the doctors find out, because they're able to hopefully find out by blood tests and things like that, by being able to run sort of medical tests that are far beyond anything that I could even comprehend.
This is the thing that I also have to talk about at this moment, and we've discussed this before on some of the cases that we've covered, is how much you would back your own kids. Because for me, if one of my own kids had caused this level of damage and this level of pain to the families that the victims have been through, I don't think I could work on a conspiracy to try and get them out of the implications that they're in. Like, even if this was a tragic accident, you've got to be there and you've got to be responsible for your actions.
My mum used to send me round to people's houses, and I used to have to go to their front door and apologise to them.
Yeah.
By the way, not for anything as serious as this, obviously. No. But what I'm saying is, in terms of like actually making your kids accountable and giving them these sort of like almost a little bit embarrassing life lessons that make you think, fuck that, I'm not going to do that again, because the wrath of my mother might come down on me, or my father, or whatever. And I'm not saying you should scare your kids or anything like that, but fuck me, like the bad parenting that is on show here is so detrimental in the way that this case was handled.
Well, I'm glad you said bad parenting, because it wasn't just that the parent was doing. Her mum was also in her DMs on her social media, because there was actually a request, wasn't there, from, was it a modelling agency or someone that was interested in Mackenzie that had reached out and tried to contact her?
Well, funnily enough, the first thing that I would do when I woke up, right? If me and you had been in a car crash, Josh, the first thing I'd do, how's Josh?
I'd check the DMs and see if anyone had been interested in any brand deals.
Well, clearly you're cut from a similar cloth to Kenzie then, because that's exactly what she did do. Do you know what I mean? It's mental behaviour. It is. And I'm sorry, people. Like, I want to give my opinion on this a little bit more. Everyone says, you can't say how someone should grieve. You can't say how someone should grieve. Take it from someone who's had to do a fuckload of grieving in their life. Trust me, yeah? You can't say how someone should grieve. You can't say that someone's grieving might not be, or someone might not be in as bad a place during their grief because they're on a holiday as opposed to sat inside crying, yeah? Some people might get angry, some people might get sad. It doesn't mean that the person that got angry is any less sad than the person that started crying instead of the person that started hitting walls or whatever, yeah? What I'm trying to express to you here is grief can pour out of you in different ways, and it's very hard to observe it and to judge people on the way that they grieve. That being said, there are a few things that I have always understood, for me personally, just cannot run in line with me grieving. One of them's eating. You know that full well, Josh. How long you been my friend now? You know I go on, what's it? Involuntary hunger strike, I call it.
Yeah.
My body rejects food. If I'm grieving, if I'm worried or whatever, my body rejects food. The other thing I definitely don't want to look at, I don't want to look at social media, bro. No. I don't want to look at my social media at that time, yeah? Some people may say, well, hold on, she would have been getting the gratification from the well-wishers and the people that were giving her that, and maybe that's part of that grieving process. Fair enough. But when you start posting unrelated videos from your hospital bed, not videos about your process grieving, not about the incident or whatever, that's when I start to raise an eyebrow. When you start replying to brands that have reached out, both eyebrows start to get raised. And when your mother starts messaging companies that haven't even reached out to see whether they want to work with you, it really, really makes me ask questions about your integrity, your morals, but not only that, the thought process and the grieving process that her parents should have been going through. Because if your child, for right or for wrong, innocent or guilty, is the cause of another parent's child or children across the board being taken away from them, you should too be grieving. Not laughing, nor making light-hearted jokes about the brands that you could work with or the people that you may come into contact with, like Kim Kardashian. You'd be grieving for those families. Now, eventually, after spending weeks in hospital, Kenzie is released. She's posting videos. She's attending Halloween parties, one of which she dresses up as a corpse for, and she also attends music festivals. But after basking in her glory, being the talk of the town, many many people feeling sorry for her and way more people knowing her than they did before the crash, Mackenzie's story was all about to change. Because on the 4th of November 2022, when she's driving back from a physical therapy session, the police pull her over and they arrest her for 2 murders. They take her back to the station, they book her in, and now we find out what the police have been up to while Mackenzie has been partying and posting it on social media after a crash, more or less.
What the police do is they start looking through the CCTV evidence around the crime scene and try to find and figure out what actually happened. Could it have been an accident or car failure, or was it something much more concerning that actually occurred? What they discovered was that at 5:34 a.m, Shrilla's 2018 Toyota Camry did take that turn, as Joey said, from Pearl Road. Mackenzie takes the turn, she reduces her speed, and she uses a turn signal and drives incredibly normally. So, Joey, you would very much say that she was under the control of the vehicle and she knew exactly what she was doing at that moment, wouldn't you?
Yeah, she had that vehicle under control and she was aware of her surroundings.
But there's a second video about a minute later, which was very different indeed. It's positioned down the road on the side of a commercial building, and the footage shows the immense speed of the car, approximately 100 miles an hour, as we've said before it then hits the building. So what the police do is they actually look through the vehicle and they find that there is a recording device as part of the vehicle, as part of the engine computer unit, and they can show data from the vehicle and what it was doing. What they find is that the vehicle, before the crash, and they only get up to about 5 seconds of data, the car was actually going flat out, full acceleration, over 100 miles an hour, as they say. Then there's a violent turn and the gear knob had actually been engaged. So basically gears were selected and it had actually been put into neutral before the crash occurred. So this is all quite clear now. Mackenzie knew what she was doing. She was in control. She had limited substances in her system. And this was all at the time of the crash. Now that's all there. That's all on the record. In fact, Netflix actually covered all of that. But there was one thing that they didn't go through. They didn't tell you about what Mackenzie was doing a few days before the crash occurred.
This blows my mind that Netflix didn't include this in the documentary.
So the police also go through Mackenzie's GPS phone data, and what they find is that she was at that intersection, the same intersection of the crash, 3 days before. Now, you might be going, well, this could be a coincidence. She might have been driving home from school, or she might have been doing something else. There was an obvious reason why she was doing it. Well, the fact of the matter is that that wasn't the case. It was a completely random location, miles away from any other routes that she was going for. And the GPS location was recorded at what time, Joey?
I don't know the time.
The time was at 5 a.m. in the morning, almost exactly the same time that the crash occurred. So police therefore argued that this might have been a dress rehearsal before the tragic events of that night.
Well, I mean, if you were going to say to me the time was 5 p.m, I would have said due to rush hour and people coming home from work and stuff like that, probably not your best time to do a dry run, so to speak, as horrific as that sounds. 5 a.m. is the sort of time you could have empty roads and you could have the ability to do a dry run.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the roads, because Progress Drive, which was the road in which the incident occurred, is in a commercial area, which means at 5 a.m. it is completely deserted. Now, remember this, we said that the vehicle wasn't found for 45 minutes after the crash occurred, and that is because there was no other through traffic. There was no one else to get in the way. This Progress Drive actually is a completely straight road, so there's no turns. You can get up to speed very easily, and there is an intersection, a T-junction, that has a brick wall at the end of it. So again, all of this is adding up, and it seems like there may have been premeditation there. It seems like this road might have been selected by Mackenzie because she knew what she was wanting to do.
Well, it does seem like that. It seems like she's picked this road as a runway, so to speak.
So the next thing we've got to talk about is, beyond the state of the car, whether they were wearing seatbelts or not. And this is a key part of the police investigation, because they found that Mackenzie was wearing a seatbelt. Now, the rest of the occupants, this has been debated, and I think people online have said that the two other occupants, Davion and Dominic, didn't wear their seatbelts. Now, it has been said that Dominic did have his seatbelt on in the front seat, so he was in the front, Davion was behind Dominic in the car. We know for certain that Davion didn't have his seatbelt on. Now, as I say, not sure of the front seat, but this isn't a case of someone going, don't wear your seatbelts. I think most people get into a car these days and put their seatbelt on. I think that happens more often than not.
I definitely do, but if I got into a car, put my seatbelt on, and then the other two passengers didn't get in and put their seatbelt on, unless that's my kid or my missus, that's not my problem.
No.
Thing, right?
No.
Again, like, I'm just on about letter of the law. That's not my problem in terms of, like, from a legal sense. Obviously, we know that our cars don't stop fucking beeping until you put the seatbelt on. So we'd be like, put your seatbelt on, even if you're not going to wear it. Stick your seatbelt in the thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, whatever. Her not having her seatbelt on isn't really an indication of... her having her seatbelt on and the other boys isn't an indication of guilt on her behalf of, like, right, you deliberately did this. You told these boys to take their seatbelt off or anything like that. But do you know what it does do for me, actually? I took a different sort of maybe pattern of thought. And I thought, well, maybe all three did have their seatbelts on at the start of the journey.
I'm glad you're saying.
We know that Dom was the passenger in the car, right?
Front seat passenger.
The front seat passenger in the car. Davion was behind him. Davion's seatbelt was undone, right? Well, Davion could well have undone his seatbelt when he realised that this fucking girl is bombing it at about 100 miles an hour down the road. That could be when that seatbelt came on came off. And that could also fall in line with when the car shifts from drive into neutral. Now, why did it do that? Why did it do that? Because Mackenzie Shirilla has no memory whatsoever of the incident, right? But we know that the foot on the pedal for the accelerator was forced fully down, okay? I've done magic mushrooms. Your body goes fucking limp. You can't, if you're on magic mushrooms, you ain't getting your foot down on that accelerator in that way, right? Your body feels like you're floating through the air. You can't drive a car. So I believe that there's every possibility that Davion took his seatbelt off in an attempt to save them from their tragic, heartbreaking fate. I also believe the Dom could have been involved in that attempt, and because of the fact that he was the front seat passenger, didn't need to take his seatbelt on. Maybe he thought that he could put the car in neutral or something like that. Maybe that sharp steer of the wheel just before the crash could have had something to do with that. But I'm of the belief that the seatbelt theory, right, pushes me closer towards a theory that the two men were either conscious or became conscious and became aware of what was going on moments before their death.
This is the incredibly scary evidence, but I would say there's one more piece of evidence that came out in the police investigation that is even more concerning than that seatbelt evidence as well, right? And it occurs on the day of July 17th, 2022. This was 2 weeks before the crash, and while riding as a passenger in Mackenzie Shrilla's car on Interstate 71, Dominic Russo becomes incredibly frightened by her erratic and dangerous driving, and it got so bad that he had to call his mother, Christine, for help. Christine sent a family friend called Christopher Martin to go and pick him up. And while Martin was on the phone to Dominic to try and locate them, he hears Shirilla screaming. And she says, "I'm going to wreck this car right Now, when Martin arrived, he found the car had pulled over onto the shoulder and he witnessed a physical altercation between the couple inside the vehicle. Now, obviously, prosecutors used that piece of evidence in the trial itself, and it showed that there may have been a premeditation on Kenzie's part to use the vehicle to actually cause damage to her boyfriend.
I mean, if it's proven that I say to you, Josh, I'm going to beat you to death with this iPhone here, right? And then 2 weeks later, you do get beaten to death and the actual instrument looks like it could have been an iPhone, then you're probably going to put two and two together and go with the fella that accused of doing it with that exact weapon.
Yeah, exactly that. Now, it wasn't just that either. Did you see the 90,000 text messages between the couple?
I didn't see them. Not all 90,000 anyway.
Well, this is, some of them were incredibly concerning.
Yeah, they were. And one of the patterns that I noticed from Kenzie is more predominantly, I would say, than actually threatening violence against Dom. It would often be to threaten violence against herself, like in the act of saying, I'm going to write off this car, which she full well knew that she was inside of too.
Yeah. And again, the manipulative behaviour was very much on show from reading these text messages, because it wasn't just Dominic that she was threatening, again, both with physical violence and also, abuse mentally as well. It was also herself. She would say that if Dominic would ever break up with her, that she would actually cause harm to herself, and she would use these threats over and over again, even though friends of Dominic said that he wanted to break up with her. She made it incredibly difficult and very concerning if he did.
It's a disgusting amount of manipulation. And you know what? We were talking about 21 there, the age of being able to go out and party and do things like that in America. Dominic was approaching his 21st birthday.
Yep.
This girl was nowhere near her 21st birthday, bro. She was a while off, yeah? And when you've got insecure people that want to cut you off from your friends, isolate you, do things like that, they do not want you to enter a new phase of your life where you're able to exclusively have access to areas and do stuff that person, the insecure person, is not able to.
And these threats got so concerning that actually, when she was 15, Mackenzie had the police called on her because of how worrying these threats actually were. The police and the fire department rock up to the house, they speak to Mackenzie's parents, and they say she's got an active threat against her life. Like, we're really worried about her. You need to do something about this. And do you know what the parents actually said?
No.
So the parents actually go, we're not that worried about it. Like, we're going to look after this. You don't need to be concerned. Get out of our house, basically.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
We just give her some more Mary Jane. She'll be fine. She'd be sweet. We just fucking feed her skunk until the cows come home.
Well, this is the thing.
And then sit there in silly fucking T-shirts on the Netflix documentary. Like, you're on a Netflix documentary talking about your daughter who's fucking murdered two people, and you're dressed like you're fucking lying down on your sofa or something like that. Even just the informality of that I felt was offensive. But these parents are so neglectful that it's dangerous.
Yep, they are. And this is the thing, you mentioned it as well, the substances. They were actually questioned on whether she was taking substances. And there was a record of things. And they just said it's not a big deal. They said, I've heard that they said, well, it could be worse. She might be taking dope. She might have been taking something more serious. It's like, come on.
Yeah. She might be in a few years if you carry on this way. You're fucking... Oh, don't.
It's so bad. It's so
Don't. You're going to realise why I hate the Shrillas in a minute. Wait till you get onto the fucking prison calls of these cunts.
Yeah. So by November the 4th, 2022, that is where she was arrested and charged for murder. And by August 2023, the trial begins. Mackenzie actually waived her right to a jury, and her defense argued that she suffered a medical blackout. She actually uses that, I suppose, the seizure theory, and she actually blames it on a medical condition that is actually called POTS. That's the abbreviation for it. Now, again, this condition, as far as I'm aware, is basically like low blood pressure. Like, if you stand up and you feel a bit dizzy, that's like a symptom of this thing, right? So basically, you don't have control of your blood in the same way that like a person without this condition would have.
And therefore, you don't have control of your muscles in the same way.
And therefore, you have the ability to get into a car, drive it incredibly normally, then go 100 miles an hour, but then lose control. So again, The defence's story didn't quite add up.
Right, okay, yeah. So the POTS that she suffers from helps her to get behind the wheel, drive it. And do you know what? When you're driving 100 miles per hour, yeah, I've got up to 80, 90 on the motorway before or whatever, you've got to both hand that, fully control, whatever. And listen, I'm a big 6 foot plus strapping lad. Do you know what I mean? I'm not a little young girl who is at the wheel of the car after, at worst, if you don't go on any substances, at worst, a night of sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay? So all of a sudden, that kicked in. You had the adverse reaction of what you would usually expect in terms of your body going limp and your muscles failing you and whatever. You actually stiffen up. And then I suppose while she's having this attack, the other two passengers are the ones that are fiddling with the gears and that quick turn on the wheel and stuff. It would have all been that. And obviously, she's completely out of it, which is really, really convenient.
And let's be honest, mate, the prosecution's case, therefore, was very clear and obvious. Like all of the evidence that we've described, all of the video evidence, all of the stuff in the hospital itself, there was so much to actually convict her of, and that is exactly what happened. By August the 14th, Judge Russo, who incidentally is not related to Dominic in any way, finds Shirilla guilty on 12 counts, including 4 counts of murder, 4 counts of felonious assault, 2 counts of aggravated vehicular homicide, 1 count of drug possession, 1 count of possessing criminal tools, and 1 count of possessing criminal tools.
And also, just before you tell me the charges, Josh, come for me if you want. I don't believe that Mackenzie Shrilla has POTS. I can't find any medical exemption, anything legitimate enough to make me believe it, and therefore that's why a courtroom didn't believe it.
I've got something that's going to blow your mind. When you apply for a driving license, you have to declare all of your medical conditions for obvious reasons. If you've ever had a seizure,
epilepsy,
if you've ever had anything wrong with you that could affect your ability to drive a motor vehicle, you have to make that really clear. Do you reckon her mum did that?
No, I don't think she would have put that on there.
She didn't.
She didn't.
So again, if she had this condition, I don't know whether it's like illegal to not do this, but it would make no sense if it wasn't illegal, would it?
I don't know whether it was legal or illegal, but it means that your insurance isn't valid.
Yeah.
So if you had it, if you did have POTS and you had been diagnosed by an actual professional, and then you had a crash, that car wouldn't be insured.
Judge Russo famously described Shirilla as literal hell on wheels, and she concluded that Shirilla's action in the final sections of the drive were controlled, methodical, deliberate, intentional, and purposeful. The judge also rejected any notion that this was a tragic accident, and they basically said that this was not reckless driving, it was murder. Shirilla was subsequently sentenced to 2 concurrent terms of 15 years to life in prison. And what that means, Joey, is that she basically could get out after just 15 years for a double murder. I could not believe how lenient that sentence could actually be. Especially in America, you'd feel that the sentences would potentially be even harsher, because we basically go on the British system all the time. We say the sentences aren't that harsh at all. I thought she would get a lot longer than that.
Well, listen, at least she's been having an awful time in prison, eh?
Yeah.
Or,
has she?
Or has she?
Has she? You tell me.
I don't know if prison life has been too unforgiving to Mackenzie Shrilla, because when the documentary actually first came out, there were a couple of people online, you know the internet sleuths, online that shared stories about their time incarcerated with Mackenzie Shrilla. Now, those online sleuths were called online sleuths, so they then had to go back and get their prison numbers and put them on to prove it. But these people did, in fact, share the same prison as Mackenzie Shrilla. And I'll go on the account of one of the women that I saw speak about Mackenzie and her time in prison, and she said that at first, Mackenzie Shrilla had very much been a loner in prison. She was going round, she was trying to make friends, she was doing so. We call it canteen. What do they call it over in America?
I don't know what the American
They call it your
is.
something, your
commissary?
Your commissary, maybe.
I think it's commissary.
Commissary is obviously the thing, but they have it. There's basically there's a system in the prisons.
I think it's commissary.
Yeah, no, commissary is what you get, but there's a system in the prisons of what you can pay into. Basically.
Oh, okay, fine, yeah.
Payment system.
Yeah.
Now, I would say that, I don't know, like, I'm just guessing, but like from prison programs I watch, 60 Days In, things like that, I would say that only about 30% of the prisoners in there actually get money and have it. And obviously that makes them more powerful prisoners. Apparently she used to use her canteen, her commissary, as forms of making friends and stuff like that. And at first she was knocking about of a couple of girls that were in there who also wanted to be influencers. Now, before Kenzie's case had really made global headlines and stuff like that, she was walking around the prison telling people that she was in there because she was behind the wheel on magic mushrooms and this tragic accident happened. Now, she knew that factually that had been proven in her court case. It wasn't the truth, but that was what she was telling people to try and get an easier ride. Now, it's been alleged that since she's been inside, she's had over 36 conduct reports looked into. So each time a prisoner is said to be doing something they shouldn't do, such as running a side hustle, which is what Mackenzie Shirilla has apparently been doing, making jewelry for people in prison. That very much sounds to me plausible. If anyone remembers the arrest footage, she had jewelry that was homemade and stuff like that on her arms. Also, what has been leaked from prison, if you want to just have a little look on TikTok now or anywhere for yourself, are phone calls from Mackenzie and her fucked up, deluded fucking mother, who's laughing down the phone with Kenzie and saying, "You're never going to believe it. The British News are running with it. Oh, the Daily Mail. Oh my God. Oh. Listen, why on earth would you be going on your phone call and spending those precious amount of minutes that you've got to be able to be on the phone to your child, who apparently you believe is innocent, but you're going, the Daily Mail are printing stories. They're printing stories about your daughter being a murderer. It's nothing that you should be saying with a fucking smile on your face or a laughing tone coming from your mouth." And furthermore, to make it even worse, do you know what Mackenzie's response to that was?
Come.
She went, "Oh, well, maybe Kim might reach out herself then." Yeah? They're not talking about Kim Jong-un. They're talking about fucking Kim Kardashian.
By the way, just to make this really clear, she wouldn't have been able to represent her anyway legally because she hasn't passed the bar exam.
But she's Rob Kardashian's daughter, so that's all that matters. If he got OJ off...
He did.
Then maybe old Kim could get Kenzie off. Or maybe not. Maybe she just ignore your inboxes like she has been for the past fuck knows however long. She also got in trouble because she was caught... can't say the word on here, having phone you know what inside the prison. She was caught flashing herself to another person who was on a video call with her, and that person was said to also be doing those sort of acts. This person that I saw speaking about their time, which is proven, by the way, she was definitely in prison with Mackenzie Shrilla, she said that manipulating relationships is something that Mackenzie's still very much doing inside. She's not sure of relationships in there, and during this prisoner's time, she said she saw her involved in 3 female-female relationships inside of the prison. She's also been caught with nude images inside her prison cell, which is obviously contraband. That is not something you're allowed. And the inmate that was actually in there said that when she was in there, Mackenzie Shrilla spoke nothing how she spoke in the documentary. She carried herself, nothing, how she carried herself. And she said that towards her time, when she was about to be released, Mackenzie Shrilla had gone from hanging around with the influencer types in the prison to hanging around with the lifers. And she detailed this change as being something that had definitely contributed to Mackenzie Shrilla going from stoner on the outside world, hippie if you want, to bad girl in prison, which is what basically she now thinks she is.
So we've obviously said that we're going to cover more than what was said in the Netflix documentary. Hopefully in this episode we actually have done that. But what I want to know more than anything is what you actually thought of the documentary, Joey.
The documentary or the characters in it? And I do hate to call people characters.
Let's do the doc first, and then let's worry about the characters in it. Like, do you think it was a good documentary, first of all?
I rate all of these style of documentaries that Netflix do, and I think that the presence of police body cam footage now in enhances these sort of documentaries massively.
Yeah.
I think of like The Perfect Neighbor on Netflix.
Yep.
That was one that a lot of it was filmed through the body cam footage and stuff like that. So I thought it was an effective documentary. I thought it was a good documentary. Do I think there was key details left out? Yes. But I think that the documentary did a good job in one area. And that is shining the light on the narcissistic nature, the mollycoddling, do you know what? Too much weakness is evil, in my opinion. And if you're too weak to be able to discipline your child, to be able to teach your children right from wrong, and even in the aftermath, to show genuine remorse for the children that your child killed, I think you're just a piece of shit in general. And I think that the Netflix documentary did a brilliant job of letting those parents, the Shirillas, dig their own grave and show themselves for what they are, which is maybe loving parents, but fucking awful people. And I would also say that this is due to Netflix, it's obviously due to this person being a really good person, but Davion's dad in the documentary, I thought that he showed a perfect amount of sort of inquisitiveness in the nature when he's running through the case, when he's starting to assert that things don't add up. But also, look, I've probably shown more anger in this podcast than he did in the documentary, and that's commendable from himself. I would not be able to detach myself from the situation and be able to even show any sort of thought or care for what a person that killed my son should do or what could help that person in the future. And Davion's dad did do that from a psychological aspect. He gave his opinion on what he thinks that Mackenzie needs rather than what she gets from her parents. So to be able to even speak about how this person's life could improve is something that would take a bigger person than me. And when we're speaking about bigger people, Davion's sister, I've actually failed to mention the fact that she actually got a text message from Kenzie in the aftermath that she didn't open, she didn't follow, and she said, "Why would I want to reply to someone that killed my brother?" This is a young woman. She was clearly, from my opinion, in her sort of early teenage years, maybe 16 odd at the most. And I think that the courage for a woman to be able to not only go through what she went through and conduct herself in the way that she clearly does, to then go and do that on camera in front of a global audience, speaking about the worst thing that's happened to you at such a young age, I think one is just so commendable, but I think it's heroic in the way that she did it in such a way that was able to make me feel like I understood her, her family, her brother, who unfortunately passed away, and added such an emotional amount of weight to a story where if it wasn't for those contributions, the primary feeling coming away from that documentary would have been anger, whereas she characterized the people in it and made you feel that grief. Nowhere near as much as the families will, but yeah, I think that all of the families, including Dom's, should all be commended for their role in the documentary.
Thank you so much for watching this episode, and we want to thank all of you that have subscribed. We haven't done this yet because we haven't been around for the last week or so, and apologies for that. Joey was on holiday. Our editor has been away, so we've missed an episode. But Joey, we have hit 50,000 unbelievable, amazing people that have joined us on the Joey and Josh podcast. And we just want to say a huge thanks to every single one of you that has subscribed to the channel.
And Josh has written down all 50,000 names now, and he's going to list them all out.
Yeah.
No,
we're going to do an 8-hour
really.
live stream where we're going to do all of that.
We love you all so much. We are so grateful. 50k is not something that I thought I would be saying when we sort of launched this channel, and to be honest, didn't really have a clear direction for where it was going to go. And the channel has been directed, has been morphed, has been shaped and moulded by you guys, especially the members to the channels that are able to interact with us, put their cases forward, their suggestions for cases that they want us to cover. And one thing I'm very proud of being able to say is that I would say 90% of the membership suggestions have been covered now. Unfortunately, there's that many that the 10% could probably have about 3-4 months worth of videos coming out from us. So we will get round to all of them. And if you want to leave your own blueprint on this channel, you can become a member for less than the price of a cup of coffee. The link is in the description, and therefore you're able to tell us what you want to see covered next.
And if you want to watch another video from us that is similar to this case, why don't you check out the video that we did on Gabby Petito? That will be on screen right now. Another Netflix documentary, and one that you would absolutely enjoy if you enjoyed this one. We'll see you all in the next one.